Hello, my dear friends. You're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 28th of November of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, let's talk about a very important update that we got from the territory of the United States of America. The Telegraph reports that the US is prepared to recognize Russia's control over Crimea and other new Russian territories in exchange for an agreement to end the war. According to the newspaper, the US President will send his special envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner to Moscow next week to make a direct proposal to Vladimir Putin. Also, according to the newspaper's sources, the Trump administration no longer cares about the European Union's position. One informed source told the newspaper, "It's becoming increasingly clear that the Americans don't care about the European position. They're saying the Europeans can do whatever they want." And this is a case statement. The Europeans can do whatever they want. Another important thing that something like this also was told by the President of the Russian Federation yesterday during his statements about the situation in Ukraine and the peaceful settlement of the conflict. The President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, stated that recognition of Crimea, Donbass and Novorossiya should be a subject of negotiations between Russia and the United States of America. So as you can see, according to him, this is not a subject of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, not between Russia and the European Union, but between Russia and the United States of America. So let's summarize everything and let's try to probably speculate on this matter and to understand what kind of situation might happen in coming days or weeks. So the United States of America can recognize the territories of Donbass, of Crimea and Novorossiya as a part of the Russian Federation. So let's add these territories to map for better understanding. So everything that is currently colored as a black, so these territories, would be recognized as a part of the Russian Federation by the United States of America, or may be recognized as a part of the Russian Federation by the United States of America. And this is the proposal of the United States in exchange for a peaceful settlement of the conflict and in exchange for a peaceful plan. So obviously we're talking about huge territories. And the most important thing that neither the United States of America nor the Russian Federation cares about the opinion of Ukraine itself and the European Union. So this situation can lead to another situation, and according to the new configuration, the United States of America will recognize these territories as a part of Russia, but Ukraine will not accept this. Ukraine will reject this, as well as the European Union, which means that Ukraine and the European Union will continue fighting and will continue war with the Russian Federation, but in a completely different reality. And according to this new reality, the Ukrainians would be a side who will be occupier and aggressor, at least on these territories, for the law of the United States of America, because these territories would be recognized as a part of the Russian Federation. So I don't think that the United States of America will do anything with this, but at least this can be used for the United States of America to stop supplying and supporting Kiev, and will stop the United States of America to sell weapons to NATO countries for further sell to Ukraine and so on. And this is a very interesting situation, and it seems that something like this is going to happen. But the question is why the United States of America is doing something like this. We can speculate on this matter as long as possible. This might be connected with the situation in Venezuela, because we know that something is brewing in this area. Furthermore, this step from the United States of America could be connected with the situation with Taiwan or something like this. Anyway, we see that this is something like a gift. This is not like a recognition of these territories as a part of the Russian Federation. This is something like a gift to the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, and it seems that the President of the United States of America is trying to buy something for this. And obviously he doesn't care about peaceful settlement of the conflict in Ukraine and Ukraine's opinion. It seems that, first of all, the President of the United States of America wants to be 100% sure that if something happens, let's say in the area of Venezuela, or if something happens around Taiwan, the President of the United States of America wants to be 100% sure that Russia will not be involved in these two conflicts or something similar. And this is the price, that states is ready to pay for this, because the United States of America knows that Russia produces hundreds of missiles each month, and the Russians can use these missiles to attack through Ukraine almost every single week, 1 or 2 times, and this will allow the Russians even to collect additional missiles for the future purposes. And these future purposes can be anywhere. They can be somewhere in around Venezuela or somewhere around China. So that is why the United States of America doesn't want this to happen. So maybe this is the situation, and this is a very interesting situation. So we see that maybe the United States of America are trying to find a way how to quit this probably useless conflict, or the conflict that will never lead to victory for Ukraine, with probably good faith or something like this. Anyway, we believe that the next week will tell us about this and will tell everything about this, because as the sources stated, the representatives of the United States of America are going to come to Moscow with the purpose to meet Putin and to give him personally this proposal. So let's wait and see what is going to be next, but this is obviously a very good proposal, and it seems that the Russian Federation and the United States of America will handle this, and nobody cares what Europe is going to think about this. Now let's return back to Ukraine. The situation here is very difficult, and the most important thing is, and the most important and difficult things are connected, of course, with the corruption scandals. Today, everybody attacked Andriy Yermak, the head of the office of the president of Ukraine. He is the second person of Ukraine. Everybody attacks him, the anti-corruption agencies, detectives, the United States of America. Probably the only side who supports him and protects him is the European Union, London, and of course Warsaw. For example, today we got report that from Poland we expect an explanation, said the Polish defense minister. This is not good information for Ukraine. It's also not good information for Poland and or Western Europe. He commented on the events surrounding Yermak's search. So first of all, he was protecting Yermak, and today we got lots of attacks, lots of statements from the European countries against the anti-corruption detectives of Ukraine. So the European countries are trying to force these detectives to be more transparent in their actions, because according to information we have, these detectives and these anti-corruption agencies were created and currently are being controlled by FBI and by the US authorities and US government. So that is why we see attacks on these agencies from the European countries. At least the open source information is telling us about this configuration and this situation. So it seems that if the proposal that was described by the Western media to the Russian Federation is true, we believe that in coming days we will understand this, and we will understand this by additional attacks by the probably special service and special forces of Ukraine and European diplomats on the anti-corruption detectives. And most likely these anti-corruption detectives agencies will be closed probably within the next 1 or 2 weeks if the situation as was described by the newspaper in the United States of America is true. So let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously the most interesting things are just ahead of us. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates from the western Zaporizhzhia direction. Several sources related to the situation on the ground stated that the settlement of Stepnogorsk was completely captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So we are waiting for additional geolocations or some reports from reliable sources or map changes, but this is most likely is true. So Russians managed to finish the battle for this territory, and according to these sources related to the situation on the ground, the armed forces of Ukraine were forced to fall back further in the northern direction towards the villages of Veselyanka and Grigorovka, and the Russians moved their FPV drone operators there as well. The Russians established complete control over these two villages, over these territories, trying to destroy everything that enters this area. In this video we can see several infantry fighting vehicles that were destroyed by the FPV drone operators of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So most most likely in coming days the Russians will continue advancing further in the northern direction with the purpose to create a barrier, a buffer zone between these villages and the settlement of Stepnogorsk, and most likely from these positions the Russians may try to advance in the eastern direction with the purpose to outflank the settlement of Orechov from the north and from the northwest. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of updates about a very difficult situation on the territory of the city of Gulay-Polya. This information, by the way, was also confirmed by Ukrainian military authorities. Today they confirmed that the Russians managed to answer the eastern part of the city of Gulay-Polya and that the Russians continue advancing. As of now, the clashes are taking place as close as possible to the central part of the city of Gulay-Polya, somewhere along this line. So this is most likely a line of combat contact in the city of Gulay-Polya, and the Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, several sources stated from the pro-Russian side that in coming days, most likely the city of Gulay-Polya, or at least a major parts of the settlement, would be secured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. Furthermore, another important update is coming from the settlement of Dobropolye. Several neutral mappers reported that the Russians, as a result of offensive, managed to improve their positions in this area significantly. So we see that the Russians are about to finish the battle for Dobropolye, and then the Russians will continue moving offensive operation further in the direction of Varvarovka. So in coming days or in coming weeks, every single settlement on the Russian side of the river of Gachul would be captured and secured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk and the Pokrovsk agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours, we received small changes in this area. The first one we have already discussed during the previous video. The Russians secured the northern part of the city of Pokrovsk, and telling the truth, we are waiting when the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm Russian control over this territory. And another video was published from the intersection of the TO-515 road and the Olympiyskaya street. In this video, we can see how Russians bombed the intersection of roads with FAP 1500. Most likely the Russians were attacking maybe temporary positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, and the most important that these territories used to be considered as the territories under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. But now we see that most likely Ukrainians managed to recapture these positions as a part of their counter-offensive operation in the northern part of the city of Pokrovsk, and when Ukrainians recaptured these strongholds, the Russians attacked them with aviation and with FAPs, which means that most likely Ukrainians most likely would be forced to fall back from this area in the western direction towards the settlement of Grishina. Now let's talk about the Sivers direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very important updates. And as we discussed during the previous video, the most important update is coming from the settlement of Svyatopokrovskaya. Today, several pro-Russian sources and neutral mappers reported that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over this dense network of the fortifications to the southwest of the city of Siversk. So if this information is correct, this means that the Russians managed to cut the TO-513 road. This was one of the most important roads for the logistic of the armed forces of Ukraine in this direction. Furthermore, we can see a certain fire control over Ukrainian positions along the TO-513 road from the city of Siversk further in the northwestern direction, which means that this territory is under complete control of Russian FPV drones without any chances for Ukrainians to bring additional reinforcements and reserves from this direction as well. The situation for the armed forces of Ukraine in this area is critical. Now let's move further and let's talk about the settlement of Dibrova. So the Russians, despite the fact that they managed to enter the eastern part of the city of Liman and that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly already along the Pushkina Street, the armed forces of the Russian Federation reduced their offensive and they reduced their activities, and now the Russians are focused on the settlement by the name of Dibrova. During the previous 24 hours, lots of sources confirmed that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in this direction. Some sources stated that Russians captured just these two strongholds along the TO-513 road. Several sources stated that the Russians managed to answer the settlement of Dibrova from the north and to dig in deeper. Currently there are very heavy clashes, but the Russians are saying that most likely the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. During the previous 24 hours, we got lots of videos of how Ukrainians were trying to bring additional reinforcements and reserves in this area, but everything that entered this territory was immediately destroyed with FPV drones from the Russian side. Now let's move further and let's talk about the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region. During the previous 24 hours, huge changes were recorded in this area. It seems that the Russians will announce complete control over the city of Volchansk within the next 2 or 3 days, because as of the end of the 28th of November, the Russians were controlling significant part of the city of Volchansk, and the Russians advanced further to the south from the city limits. So according to this configuration, according to these changes, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to answer the settlement of Vilcha from the northeast. Just yesterday, according to different sources, the Russians answered the settlement from the west, and now we got report that the Russians answered the same settlement also from the northeast. At the same time, the Russians continue bombing and reducing to ruins the most southern part of the settlement, which means that the Russians are forcing the Ukrainians to fall back from the northern parts of the settlement towards the southern parts. So we believe that also the village of Vilcha would be captured and secured by the armed force of the Russian Federation in coming days or maybe even in coming hours. At the same time, the Ukrainians continue sending more and more drones to the city of Volchansk, and today pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see the ruins that led from the city of Volchansk. As you can see, the most northern part of the settlement has been reduced to ruins. The battle for these territories started almost 6 days ago, so almost 2 years passed since the beginning of the battle, and obviously the battle for the city of Volchansk is one of the longest battles since the beginning of the special military operation. But despite this situation, despite this difficult situation, we see that the Russians are about to finish the battle for this territory, and then Russians will answer the Kharkiv operational space, and the battle for Belny Kolodezh will begin as well. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.